Hello, I am Cal and welcome. In this one we're going to be prepping the motherboard for our retro gaming build that I've got planned. So what I'm going to be doing is concentrating on the memory, CPU and cooler, possibly an M.2 drive. So make sure you're in a comfortable position. I've put this on my tabletop. I've got the motherboard on the anti-static bag that it came in and also on top of the motherboard box itself. I suggest if you've got any long sleeves, roll them up, or suggest not wearing any long sleeve garments on this because you don't want any of the material getting caught on any of the components on the motherboard itself. And if you're doing it this way like me on top of the motherboard box, make sure you take your manual out and any other things that you might need to complete the job. This is part of a retro gaming build that I'm doing, and if you want to follow me, make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring that little bell. And I might turn some of these into short videos, like a separate video altogether for just installing RAM. So if you see those, don't get annoyed. It's just the fact that some people don't like watching these longer videos. Right, let's get started. So let's start with the RAM first then. This is Crucial Ballistic Gaming Memory. It's a 16GB kit. It's DDR4 3000 and it's 2x8. So there's 8GB in each of these sticks. This is because this works best in dual memory mode, i.e. 2 RAM slots occupied rather than just the one works best. These RAM sticks themselves, they do come in different formats, i.e. you can get low profile ones, you can get ones with RGB, and there's all different varying speeds, so you need to take that into consideration. I suggest you do look at a program called PC Part Picker to establish any incompatibilities, i.e. if you've got RAM installed and then you've got a cooler which spills over to the RAM slots, sometimes you'll get some height restrictions there and some incompatibilities, i.e. your RAM's too high and your cooler is too low, so they don't fit. Take that into consideration. So before you start putting anything into the motherboard, I suggest you do grab your manual and have a look. Any extra pieces of paper, inserts, usually are additions to the original manual, so the logic from that would be that the paper bit, if there's extra paper bits, is going to be more up to date than the original manual. Right, so we're on Raven Ridge here because I've got a Ryzen 5 2400G and it looks like the installation instructions are the same for all of them, but just bear that in mind if you've got a different CPU or you've got different CPUs that could be plugged into the same motherboard, that there could be possibility of differences. So looking here, we've got A2 is the first one to populate because that's single rank. The SR signifies that, and then dual rank is the same one. So it looks as though slots 2 and 4 are the ones that we need to populate. I've zoomed in really close to try and capture this the best I can. So I've had to put the motherboard upside down. You can see that the heat sinks are at the bottom. So the sequence of DIMM slots run 1, 2, 3 and 4. So I'll do number 2 first so you can see it better. And what you have to remember with this RAM is that the little slot where the crucial sign is, just here, is off center. So if you marry it up to the slot before you're actually putting it in, you can see that the slot here is way off to what it should be, so you know that it should be going in this way because it's lined up. With these DIMM slots, sometimes you'll get 2 of these clips, so you'll get one side and one the other side. This one is static, this one doesn't move, so it's just the one holder we've got on the one side here. But if you have got 2, make sure both of them are open. And what I'm going to do is just open this one as well, so I don't forget. So open all of the holders. So once you're confident that you've got it the right way around, i.e. it's marrying to the middle slot, then just put them in gently first of all, and then put two thumb each side, and then as you push down, this little lever will then push in to hold it in place. Sometimes you'll hear a satisfying click like that, and then you know that it's in nice and snug. So I'll do the same with the other stick. Hey presto. Next we'll do the CPU, and if you look at the CPU in the bottom left hand corner, there's a little triangle. That is important. This is the socket on the motherboard, just for orientation. This is the back, this is the top of the motherboard, and if you look at the CPU socket there, you should be able to see just about a little triangle. If not, you can look with these Ryzen CPUs. If you look at the very corners, there's 3 pin slots there on each of the corners except for that one, which is the corner for the triangle. So all you need to do is, with this, just push it to the side and then lift it up. And I'm going to put the camera down while I just pick up the CPU. So pick your CPU, get a good grip of it. I'm just going to show you the bottom of this because it's got an extra triangle there. And you can see where the triangle is, there's a missing pin which marries up to the motherboard. So all you need to do is just put the CPU in. If you're uncomfortable, just change your grip, because this is a little bit awkward for me doing it at this angle. Just touch the sides of the CPU, don't push it down or anything. Just make sure when you place it down, it's sort of nice and flat. Don't push down on it. If you give it a wriggle to the sides, you'll know that there's very little movement, so you know that it's been seated properly. Then all you do is just push the handle down, and then because you need to tuck it in under that little slot, you just push it that way a little bit so it goes underneath the slot, and then that should lock the CPU in nice and strong. So I'm not going to do the cooler yet. What I'm going to do is put the M.2 slot in, because I don't want the cooler in the way. We'll do the M.2 drive next. So we've got 2 ports on here. We've got an NVMe drive here, and then we've got a SATA speed drive here. So if you do use this one here, your SATA 3 port is no longer usable because it takes up the lane using this port here. So with these M.2s, they're all different sizes. So you've got to make sure that this post here is going to be in the right position before you start. Because if you pop this in and it's in the wrong place, you're going to have to take it back out and then move this post along. If you're unsure about NVMe's and SSDs and all different types of storage, I have done a previous video on this, so I'll put a link for it now, and there'll be a link in the description for it. Make sure that you've got a magnetic screwdriver for this bit because it is needed. So I've zoomed in a little bit closer to try and get the best shot I can. This is the bottom of the motherboard. The included socket should fit on here, but no matter how I try, it's not going to fit. But it is a 5mm socket when you've got the right tools. To connect the NVMe drive then, you just go in at an angle, elevate it, and then just wiggle until it slides in. And then just gently press it down with one finger, and then just go in with this other screw and then just tighten it. Just make sure it's just nice and snug. Don't put loads of pressure on this. All it needs to do is to secure it. The connector itself is pretty good, but this is just for extra security. So with storage then, using an NVMe drive for a build like this is way over the top. What I suggest you do is probably just install an SSD and then have an extra drive, a standard hard disk drive. I'm going to be using a 3TB one for all the games and things, for mainly most of the storage. It's just the fact that I had this NVMe drive spare, because I had one of these in my main build that failed, and once I've had something that's failed I don't like using it again for my main computer. That's why I'm putting it in this one, because if it fails then it's easily replaceable. The good thing about using these M.2 slots as well is that you don't need to plug any power in, because the power is taken from the motherboard. Less wires to route and a cleaner build. And what I'm thinking of installing is one of these, which is a Hyper. It's a Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo, and it's going to be a little bit quieter than the cooler that comes with the Ryzen processors. So I'm probably going to do a separate video on that, so keep an eye out for that if you're interested in that. These plastic rails are not needed, so all you need to do is get a screwdriver that fits first of all, preferably a magnetic one. Just remove them, just 4 screws. They're not glued down or anything, they're just held there by the screws themselves. There we are then, that's those removed. So if you've got one of the Ryzen processor coolers that come with the processor itself, then they just screw into these posts here. So I've actually done this before in a previous video, so I'm just going to include that clip in this one now.
Cooler installation. Check the motherboard to see where the CPU fan needs to be plugged into. Decide which way round the cooler needs to be by checking where the wire on the fan cooler is, to make it the shortest, easiest route to the CPU fan header on the motherboard. The mounts on this cooler are rectangular, not square. It will only fit in 2 ways. Pick up the cooler and decide which way is best. Gently lower the cooler towards the motherboard, matching the screws to the sockets. When you are confident they match up, apply pressure to the cooler on the sides like this, not on the central fan. The screws are spring loaded. You will have to apply a little downward pressure in order to make the screw make contact with the motherboard mounts. Start one screw off. Do not tighten it yet. We don't want to screw it in all the way, just a couple of turns. Do the same with the opposite corner. We are still just starting the screw off, remember, just a couple of turns. Do the same with the other 2 corners, and once they have all made contact, keep going round opposite corner to opposite corner, a couple of turns at a time until the screws are in nice and tight. Do not over tighten these, we do not want to damage the board. The fan wire connector on the cooler has a guiding groove on one side. Match this to the port on the motherboard. This guiding groove on the connector will slide into this lip on the motherboard port. It will only go in one way.
If you're installing the cooler that comes with the Ryzen processor, then your fan header is going to be one of these that you plug into, and then with the RGB you need to plug it into this socket here, and there'll be some software that you need to install as well. So I hope you enjoyed the older version of me. My name is Cal. Have a good morning, afternoon or good evening. Farewell till next time, and I'll see you later. Bye for now.